Glasses had no arms for 400 years. Somebody in northern Italy, in the 17 years before 1286, put 2 ground lenses in a frame and held them up to a pair of eyes. We do not know who. There is no patent, no drawing, no letter. The date comes from a sermon given 20 years later, in Florence, in which a friar tells the room that the art of making spectacles is not yet 20 years old, and that he has met the man who did it. He does not give the name. That is the whole record. What they made were reading lenses for old eyes, held in a rivet frame, like a pair of scissors, pinched onto the nose or simply held up. They stayed that way for a very long time. People tied them on with ribbon over the ears. They hooked them onto hat brims. They weighted them with cords and small lead balls behind the head. Portraits of scholars show men holding their glasses in one hand while they read, because that was the only way to keep them steady. The 2 arms that go over your ears arrived in London around 1727 from an optician who advertised them as temple spectacles. 440 years after the lenses. The hard part was never the glass. The hard part was working out how to leave your hands free. Shoes were made with no left and no right. For most of the last 1,000 years, a pair of shoes was 2 identical shoes. The same shape, cut on the same wooden last, and it was up to your feet to sort it out over the first few months. They were called straights. You were told to swap them from foot to foot regularly so that they wore evenly, which tells you how little either of them fitted. This was not because nobody had thought of it. Roman military sandals were shaped left and right, and so was older footwear before that. The knowledge was simply lost when the trade changed, and what replaced it was faster to make. One last, one shape, one size in a batch. A shoemaker with half the number of wooden forms can carry half as much and charge less. The usual date given for the change is 1818 in Philadelphia, where a shoemaker began cutting and selling shoes shaped to each foot. It was not an overnight matter. Straights were still sold for decades after, mostly because they were cheaper, and armies bought them by the 100,000. What settled it was machinery. Once lasting was done by machine, in the 1860s, cutting 2 shapes cost no more than cutting 1, and the straight shoe had no argument left. Your shoes are shaped to your feet because it stopped costing anything. Your house key is a 4,000-year-old idea. Inside your lock there is a row of small pins. Each one is cut in 2 places. When the wrong key goes in, the cuts sit at the wrong heights, and the barrel will not turn. When the right key goes in, every cut lines up along one thin gap, and the whole thing turns freely. That idea is about 4,000 years old. Egyptian locks worked on exactly the same principle, in wood, with pegs that dropped into holes and a large wooden key that lifted them clear. Some of them were as long as a forearm. Everything since has been the same thought made smaller and in metal. Roman locks were bronze and small enough to wear as a ring. Medieval European locks went the other way and became enormous, ornamented, and mostly defeated by brute force. The key you carry comes from 1861 from a father and son in America, both named Linus Yale. The son took the old pin idea, shrank it, put the pins in a cylinder, and cut the key as a flat-notched blade instead of a solid shaft. That is the whole invention. A lock the size of a walnut, and a key that weighs nothing and lies flat in a pocket. Every door you unlock today used a Bronze Age idea that somebody finally made small.